Coronation Street teases that a storm is gathering on the cobbles, an upheaval so shattering it will leave every resident reeling, and at its eye stands Billy Mayhew, whose fate has never mattered more. From the moment dawn broke on Coronation Street that morning, there was a lingering sense of foreboding. Underneath the rinsed-out sky, familiar brick facades seemed somehow colder, the gutters more hollow. Billy Mayhew, priest, confidant, friend, emerged from Weatherfield Minster clutching his collar, eyes rimmed with fatigue and sorrow. He moved with a hesitant grace, as though each footfall carried him deeper into a gathering darkness. His first call was to Mary Taylor's flat, where Mary, ever effervescent, greeted him with a sympathetic smile that faltered once she met his gaze. "Rough night?" she asked, offering tea. He accepted the steaming mug, but his hands trembled, and he could only stare into the swirling liquid as memories of the past months flickered unbidden. The invasion of the warehouse where he'd been stabbed, the harrowing descent from that perilous quarry edge, the anguished prayers whispered beside Sean's hospital bed. Each near-death encounter had taught him that life could slip away in an instant, and this morning he felt that lesson thrumming through his veins with fresh urgency. Across the street, at the Rover's return, Peter Barlow was conferring in hushed tones with Carla Connor. Rumor had already rippled through the pub. An explosion was set to ravage the undercroft of the tram depot, where Billy had volunteered to help renovate community rooms. That he would be on site, alone, is a fact that tightened Peter's jaw and made Carla's scissors click ominously against the counter. The pub buzzed with speculation. Would Billy emerge unscathed once more? Or had the fates finally conspired to claim him? By midday, Billy's path took him to the tram depot, a cavernous shell of steel girders and dust-moted sunlight. He paused at the threshold, inhaling the acrid tang of concrete and rust. Blueprints lay spread across a makeshift table, marked with Mary's handwritten notes on accessibility, with Beth's suggestions about color schemes. But the designs, once full of promise, now felt like elegies, their lines outlining a space that might never serve the community he loved. As he bent to examine a loose bolt, he heard the sharp crack of a hammer against metal, too many voices echoing in the hollow hall. He straightened and saw Theo Hawthorne, his young friend, pacing near a storage rack. Theo's expression was taut, twitching with an impatience that Billy recognized all too well, the same restlessness that had driven him into trouble before. Theo's companion, Todd Grimshaw, lingered by the exit, arms folded, eyes darting to the rafters as though expecting betrayal at any moment. Billy approached gently. "Everything all right?" he asked, voice soft but firm. Theo spun, startled. "Yeah, sorry, Vicar. Just, checking the wiring." Todd gave a curt nod, avoiding eye contact. Beneath the surface politeness lay an undercurrent of conflict. Todd's friendship with Theo had been tested by Noah's sabotage, and now the rifts widened like cracks in a dam. Before Billy could probe further, his phone buzzed. It was Adam Barlow, breathless. "Billy, you need to get out of there. Boiler room, someone's tampered with the gas mains." A warning, vague but urgent. Billy's heart thudded. "I'm on my way," he said, tucking the phone away, just as a tremor rippled through the ground, a low, ominous pulse. He raised his head, scanning the rafters, the piled timber, the dangling light fixtures. A single bead of sweat trickled down his temple. Somewhere beyond those steel beams, a fuse had been lit. He turned to Theo and Todd. "Listen, lads, I want you both to leave, now. Get to safety and warn anyone else here." Theo hesitated, eyes wide like a child caught stealing sweets. Todd's jaw clenched, knee-jerking with frustration. But Billy's gaze was unyielding. This was not a request. He delivered voice and heart with the calm authority that had guided countless souls through their own personal darkness. Moments later, Theo and Todd were gone, but before Billy could exhale, the world convulsed. A deafening roar swallowed the chatter of alarms. Flames lanced through the open doorway, scorching the rafters. Dust and debris exploded overhead, and the heat seared Billy's clothes. Instinct took over. He ducked, then ran toward the blast center, dodging a falling beam that snapped with a brittle report. Pain lanced through his side as something struck him, perhaps metal, perhaps shrapnel. He stumbled, vision narrowing. Memories cascaded, the sharp glint of Dean's blade on that fateful night, the roar of rushing water, as he had fallen from the cliff, even the warmth of Sean's final words before he slipped into that coma. Each brush with death had hardened Billy's resolve, but never had he faced a reckoning so primal. Dazed, he crawled beneath a half-collapsed scaffold. Through the acrid smoke, he glimpsed a figure, one he knew in an instant. Todd, reappearing at the fringe of the blast zone, straining to break through the smoke to reach him. Todd's face was streaked with soot and tears, his uniform collar torn. He grabbed Billy's arm, coughing. "Billy, come on, we've got to move." Billy managed a ragged smile, though every breath was agony. "Right, just a bit more." Todd braced him and half-dragged him toward the exit, each step a crucible. Behind them, the fire raged, hungry and merciless. Finally, they burst into daylight. Birds scattered, clouds of dust curled like pale ghosts. Onlookers screamed. Sirens wailed in the distance. Todd lowered Billy gently on the broken pavement. Mary Taylor, her bright hair dulled by ash, fell to her knees beside him, tears streaming as she pressed a trembling hand to his forehead. Peter and Carla rushed forward, Peter's face ashen, Carla's knuckles white with fury and fear. In the chaos, Adam Barlow appeared, relief flooding his features. "Paramedics are on their way," he said. "Hold tight, Billy." But Billy's world was narrowing, his senses dimming. He heard only the steady thrum of his own heartbeat, and the panicked chorus of voices all crying his name. As he drifted toward oblivion, one thought anchored him, that he had saved Theo and Todd, had drawn his own fate into the path of destruction, so that others might live. And that if this was how his story ended, it would be a testament to the faith he'd clung to through every trial. Outside the hospital later that day, a ring of friends and family gathered. The funeral parlor's hush lay over the strip of pavement, where Mary held a handwritten note, Billy's sermon notes, stained with soot, against her chest. Carla pressed a steaming coffee into her hand. Peter stood with arms folded, fighting tears. Theo, hoodie pulled low, stared at the ground. Todd paced restlessly, one phone pressed to his ear, calling anyone he could to find out if Billy would live. Word from the ward was scarce. Inside, Billy lay prone, unconscious, monitors beeping in rhythmic solace. His eyes fluttered as the afternoon light slanted through Venetian blinds. Each slow breath was a victory, a defiance against the long shadow of death that had dogged him for months. The lead surgeon, Dr. Riaz, had announced that Billy's lungs were damaged by smoke inhalation and his side was splintered. He'd survive, but recovery would be long, fraught with physical and emotional scars. Yet the air on Coronation Street was thick with grief. Even news of Billy's survival did little to quell the fear that underlay every neighbor's voice. Because everyone knew, this had been no accident. The explosion had roots. Cunning sabotage, whispered payback in the corridors of vengeance that ran between Todd, Noah, and Theo. Could Billy's rescue have been more than selfless heroism? Had he stepped between the consequences of Todd's retaliation against Noah, or fallen victim to some darker vendetta? Producer Lucy Richards, when pressed by reporters, only gave a cryptic smile. "Billy's journey is far from over," she said. "He'll face trials in the weeks and months ahead that will test him in ways he's never imagined, physically, spiritually, emotionally. His faith, his friendships, everything is on the line." That promise chilled the street just as effectively as any storm, because it meant that Billy's brushes with death were far from concluded, and that the tragedy everyone feared might just be beginning. As twilight fell, the lampposts flickered on, casting long shadows over Weatherfield. Under the glow, Mary emerged from the hospital, her note clutched to her heart. She paused on the pavement, staring at the closed door. Behind it lay the man, who had given hope to so many, who had stitched broken souls back together. And now he lay fractured, hanging between life and death. Yet, if the legends held true, Billy Mayhew had the strength to endure even this. The question on every lip, though seldom spoken aloud, was far simpler. When he woke, would he still recognize the street he loved? Would he still trust in the people around him? Or would the fires of that inferno have burned away more than his flesh, laying to waste the bonds he had forged so tenderly? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: Coronation Street would never be the same again. And as the first stars appeared overhead, each a cold pinprick in the vast indifference of the night, those on the cobbles whispered prayers, not for Billy's survival alone, but for all who dared to hope that love and faith could triumph over every darkness. A hush fell over Weatherfield as the first morning light crept beyond the hospital curtains. Billy Mayhew's steady breathing was the only sound in the small ward, a metronome of survival after the inferno that had nearly consumed him. Outside, life on Coronation Street moved forward, shops opened, gossip over the cafe counter resumed its daily flow, but behind these walls, the battle for Billy's future was only beginning. When Billy finally awoke, his vision swam with pale shapes, the bedside monitor's glow, Mary Taylor's anxious face blurred by tears, and the tall figure of Todd Grimshaw leaning against the window frame, his arms crossed, but his body taut with worry. Theo Hawthorne hovered just inside the door, hands shoved deep into his hoodie pockets, gaze flicking between Billy's face and the floor as though afraid to meet his eyes. Billy's first word was hoarse, barely more than a whisper: "Theo." The boy started, as though caught in the spotlight. Yeah, it's me, Reverend." Theo's voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, Billy. I should never have brought you here." The words tumbled out in a torrent of guilt. "Noah, he said he'd fix the wiring. He lied. This is all my fault." Mary hurried to brush back his hair. "Don't you dare blame yourself, love," she said softly. But Billy raised a trembling hand to forestall her. "Tell me everything," he murmured, voice barely above breath. And Theo told him, Noah's spiteful meddling, intended to get revenge on Todd for the lawsuit, the spiteful coder's plan to turn the depot into a lethal trap. How Theo, desperate to prove himself useful after the quarry incident, had accepted Noah's assistance without question. How the fuse had been lit, metaphorically and literally, by misunderstandings and unchecked anger. Todd, who had arrived at the hospital minutes later, face drawn and eyes rimmed red, sat beside Theo. He placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. "You did the right thing once you knew," Todd said quietly. "You called Adam. You warned me. You saved me, Theo." But Theo shook his head, guilt shading every line of his face. "I kept the truth from you," he whispered. "I let him manipulate me." Billy closed his eyes, exhaustion and pain washing over him. "We all make mistakes," he said, each word a small victory against the scorch of his lungs. "It's what we do afterward that matters." He managed a faint smile. "I'll hold you both to that." Over the next week, Coronation Street was rife with questions. The police had launched an inquiry into the sabotage. Todd's assault on Noah, after discovering that the so-called repairs were a deliberate trap, had prompted the younger man to press charges. Headlines clamored over the unfolding drama: respected vicar nearly killed, young apprentice caught in the middle, lawsuit sparks violent revenge. But behind the headlines, quieter dramas unfolded more intimately. Theo spent his days at Billy's bedside, sketching renovation plans in a battered notebook, each line a promise to finish what he'd begun responsibly. He and Todd pored over wiring diagrams together, Todd's military precision tempered by Theo's creative flair. They worked side by side in the hospital chapel, where Billy held impromptu services for the staff and patients. Under the soft glow of stained glass windows, the three of them formed an unlikely sanctuary of healing. Noah Conway, by contrast, disappeared into the shadows. Accused of criminal negligence, he was barred from the depot site and placed under strict bail conditions. He visited the hospital once. Todd had dragged him there for a mock reconciliation, but Noah's bitterness was a slow-burning ember. He refused to meet Billy's eyes, instead muttering a perfunctory apology to the vicar, as if words alone could absolve him of playing the role of arsonist. Meanwhile, Billy's physical recovery was painstaking. His lungs had suffered smoke damage, his side bore scars that would ache for months. Mary insisted on daily physiotherapy sessions in the ward's tiny gym, and Peter Barlow dropped by with protein shakes, though Billy preferred Mary's herbal teas. Carla brought homemade soups and insisted he sip slowly, lecturing him on the virtues of vitamins and rest. Each friend brought a piece of the street's strength to his bedside, reinforcing the bonds he'd once helped mend for others. Yet it was the nights that tested Billy most. Sleepless hours dragged on as memories of the explosion haunted him, the roar of steel collapsing, the heat that singed his collar, Todd's voice calling his name through the smoke. In the darkness, he relived every moment of helplessness, every second when death had seemed not just possible but inevitable. He wondered if his faith, so long his anchor, could hold him amid this storm of doubt and pain. One evening, as rain pelted the hospital windows, Billy summoned the courage to share his fear. Todd and Theo had resumed their wiring project across the street at the depot, under careful police supervision, but Noah's name still hovered between them like a curse. Mary sat on the edge of Billy's bed, smoothing his hair back. "I'm angry," Billy confessed, voice trembling. "Angry at Noah for the deceit, at myself for walking into that trap, at God for letting me fall. How do I offer comfort to others when I'm so broken?" Mary reached for his hand. "You don't have to be perfect, Billy. You just have to be honest. That's what makes you real to people." He nodded, tears gathering. "Then I'll be honest. I'm terrified. But if I walk away now, if I let this fire burn away my spirit, what good am I to anyone?" The following morning, Billy held a small gathering in the chapel. Word had spread that he was ready for his first public service since the accident. The pews filled with faces etched by concern, Peter, Carla, Mary, even Noah peeking from the back door with a conflicted expression. Todd and Theo stood at the front alongside him, unannounced but ever-present. Billy's opening words were measured, each phrase chosen with deliberate care. "My dear friends, there are times in our lives when we are tested beyond what we ever imagined. We face trials that shake us to our core, that make us question the very foundations of our faith." He paused, eyes sweeping the room. "I know some of you believed I would not walk out of the flames alive. I know some of you wondered if I deserved change after all the mistakes I've helped others through. But here I stand, not unscathed, but alive, because of each of you." Theo and Todd shared a glance, pride shining in their eyes. Noah, who had edged forward to the second row, seemed to shrink under the weight of Billy's gaze. For a moment, his defiance faltered, he looked away, ashamed. "I have been reborn in those moments of darkness," Billy continued. "And so I offer you this. Faith is not found in unbroken hearts, but in hearts that choose to be bound again." He gestured toward Theo and Todd. "Our wiring project at the depot will proceed, no more sabotage, only teamwork. And Noah, if you're listening, there's still a place for forgiveness here, if you choose it." The silence that followed was thick, as though the walls themselves were absorbing the gravity of his words. Then, one by one, the congregation stood. Mary's applause turned into tears, Peter nodded solemnly, Carla's lips trembled into a proud smile, and to everyone's surprise, Noah rose from his seat, flushed and hesitant. He offered a shaky, "I'm sorry," barely audible. Then he sat, hands clasped, as though uncertain if redemption was yet his. Over the weeks that followed, plans for the depot's reopening moved forward under cautious optimism. Todd and Theo worked side by side, their friendship cemented by shared guilt and renewed purpose. Mary organized community coffee mornings there, Peter arranged for old tram posters to be framed on the walls, Carla sourced cozy furnishings, so that the space would feel welcoming. All the while, Billy presided over each milestone, offering prayers of gratitude and cautious hope. But shadows still lurked. Noah's court date for the lawsuit approached, and tabloids speculated whether he would face jail time or community service. Todd, under Noah's bail conditions, could not approach him, no chance for a true resolution yet. And Billy's own health remained fragile. Every gust of street wind reminded him of the fragility of life. On the eve of the depot's grand opening, Theo stayed late to adjust a final light fixture. The lamp flickered uncertainly. He tapped it, it flared bright. Theo exhaled in relief. Technology, it seemed, still had a mind of its own. Suddenly, a soft sigh of breath at his shoulder made him spin around. Billy, leaning on his crutch with a mischievous grin, had returned after work rounds. "Thought I'd check on my apprentice electrician," Billy teased, though Billy's voice still carried the rasp of healing lungs. Theo laughed, heart light for the first time in weeks. They swapped jokes as they tightened screws and tested switches, the depot humming back to life around them. Behind them, Todd watched from the doorway, arms folded, an unreadable expression on his face. As the last bulb glowed steady, he joined them. "Nice work," he said to Theo. Then, turning to Billy, he added quietly, "Thank you, again, for saving me." Billy offered him a small nod. "We do what we must for those we love." Todd paused. "I wish Noah could see this," he said. "Maybe then he'd understand what we're all fighting for." Billy placed a hand on Todd's shoulder. "Perhaps when the time is right, Noah will find his own way here." Theo glanced between them. "Billy," he said softly, "where do we go from here?" Billy looked across the depot, imagining the laughter and chatter that would soon fill the space. "Forward," he replied. "Together." And as they stood beneath the gentle glow of the new lights, the late-night hush of the depot held a promise that Coronation Street scars, like Billy's own, could heal with love, forgiveness, and the steadfast courage to rebuild what was broken. The future remained unwritten, but for Billy, Theo, and Todd, hope shone brighter than any flame.